All right, so we are back for part 3, moving on to perception of the self. And I do want to say something I should have said right off the bat in the first video. And this is only if you're viewing this on YouTube. I don't think you can do from Canvas. There's an option when you go to that little circle that looks like a clock, like gear. It's a circle with a lot of different points on it. It's usually attributed to settings in most things. So if you go to that, you can go to playback speed and you can make it speed up or you can slow it down. I know I tend to speak really quickly, especially when I'm nervous, which I usually am when I'm recording videos, recording lectures, which somehow makes me way more nervous than lecturing in person. I don't know why. But also when I get really passionate about something, I tend to speak really fast, and I know I speak too fast for some people. So please, if you're watching this on YouTube, click that and slow me down. Slow me down so much. I honestly do that with some videos. There's some channels that I subscribe to and they talk so fast. I'm like, I gotta slow this down. So, you know, we all have to do it. But I do want to point that out. Please do that if I am speaking too fast for you. I won't be offended. I won't even know. So how could I be? Anyway, let's move on. Perception of the self. Self-concept. Self-concept is the basis of, it's the first thing that happens before we develop anything else that we've heard of as far as the self goes, like self-esteem or self-worth, self-presentation, all of that. Self-concept comes first. Self-concept starts to develop when you're a baby. I feel like I'm going to say this wrong. I feel like it's around like 7 months. It might begin slightly at 3 months. 3 months is really when you start to see yourself separate from your caretaker. But I think it's probably around 7 months that 6 to 7 months, you start developing some form of idea of who you are. And that is what self-concept is. It's the image that you have of yourself. Who do you think you are? So think about all of the things that you attribute with yourself. Do you think you're smart? Do you think you're smart in some ways but maybe dumb in others, or maybe just like average in other ways? Or do you think, do you think that you're attractive, or do you think you're attractive in some ways but not others? Or do you think that you're funny? Or do you think that, that you are, you're somebody who really wants to do well in life, or someone who maybe just kind of doesn't care and wants to go with the flow, if you're type A or type B, or if you're driven, or if you're more a follower or a leader, any of these things, if you're lazy or if you're mean, or any of these things that you think of yourself, how you think of yourself is your self-concept. It is how you perceive your own person, your emotional traits, what you like. Like I'm a huge fangirl, right? I'm in my 40s, but I have no shame. I am obsessed with the MCU. I drew this of Loki. I love him. But I'm also a huge fangirl when it comes to Harry Potter. I have 2 Harry Potter tattoos. I love Pirates of the Caribbean. I'm looking at a new shirt I just got over there from Pirates at World's End. Game of Thrones. I wrote my thesis on Game of Thrones and narrative rhetoric. And so that's a huge part of my identity and how I see myself, is this, how much I love and appreciate and value storytelling. And it is really valuable. I think that just kind of saying I'm a fangirl really underplays how important stories are. But that's how I see myself, right? I think I'm smart, but I don't think I'm smart in some ways. I think I'm very funny, but I know people who are funnier. And I definitely compare myself with them. Social comparison theory, look at the bottom. And so I have all these, I think I'm lazy. I do think I'm lazy. I think I'm unorganized. I also think that I'm incapable of things, but I've also proved myself wrong. And this is why this really matters, why I'm saying all these things, is because we have these ideas of who we are, and these ideas tend to want to be stagnant. our whole lives. Who we think we are at one age, we tend to hold on to those at other ages. And then we kind of make excuses. Like, I think I'm lazy, so I'm like, I need to clean up my car, but I'm not gonna right now. And part of that subconsciously might be because I have this expectation of myself that I am a lazy person. So I'm kind of making that excuse for myself because that's who I think I am. But the fact is that our self-concept, a healthy self-concept, can change and should be flexible. Even if you have your lazy moments, or even if you're prone to laziness, you need to understand that that is not how you're bound. So for example, I didn't think I was capable of writing even a 12-page paper one year. And a year later, I was writing multiple 30-page papers, 20 to 30-page papers in grad school. And then I was like, oh, this is killing me. Then I get into my second year of grad school, and I'm like, I decide the last semester I'm going to write a thesis, which even my professors were like, you're delusional. You need a full year to do this. What are you doing? And you're going to write a rhetorical thesis? I have it right here, actually. Rhetorical thesis, it's 100 pages. And they're like, you can't do, like, rhetorical theses are the longest type of thesis. They are usually the very, like, as far as word count goes, the longest. And I was already struggling with rhetoric, and they were like, you can't do this in a semester. And in my, I don't know, in my delusion, I was like, yes, I can. And then I start doing it. I was like, what am I doing? I can't do this. But I was already locked in, right? And I started thinking, I can't do this. Luckily, I had a grad advisor who really, really was, every time I thought I was like, I can't do this, she was like, call me. And then, I would hang up the phone feeling I could do anything. What happened in the middle of that semester, however, because it was spring 2020, was COVID. And that threw a huge wrench into what I was already struggling with. I still pulled it off, and I'm so proud of what I achieved. I'm not like, oh man, I just kind of like barely met the requirements. No, I am so proud of what I did. I don't know how I did it. 109 pages. And the fact is that I thought I was unorganized. I thought I was lazy. I thought all these things, but because I had the support system reminding me that's not your capabilities. That might be who you kind of default into, but you can surpass that. You can overcome that. And I did, in a way that even when I read my own thesis now, I'm like, who wrote this? I don't even understand what I'm saying. It's so like heightened scholarly like language. And I'm like, this is amazing. I can't believe I did this. So the fact is our self-concept tends to be stagnant. It wants to stay the same. But that's a really unhealthy way of going about our life because it sets up excuses that we make for ourselves. So self-concepts lead directly into self-esteem. So first is how we see ourselves, and then it's how we evaluate those things that we see in ourselves. Maybe I think that I'm lazy, so that affects my self-esteem, and I think I'm less than other people. Or maybe, and sometimes outside factors as well. I mentioned that I didn't grow up with my dad, and that was a huge factor in me growing up and my self-esteem. And it took a lot to repair that. A lot of things, a lot of therapy, a hospitalization. It took a lot to really kind of build this self-esteem and my self-worth up. It was a lot of work, and it still needs work. And we all have those. We all have something in our life that affects negatively our self-esteem. But we also have positive aspects of our self-esteem. This is not either. Your self-esteem is either great or it's bad. That's not how it works. But that all comes from our self-concept. And the fact is our self-concept comes from the time that we start developing it. And as a child, as a baby, it starts forming how other people are treating us. So your caretaker, if your caretaker was very loving and paid a lot of attention to you, your self-concept is off to a great start. If your self-concept, or if you're a child or a baby and your caretaker is just kind of absent, or maybe they're abusive in some way, or, whether it's psychological or emotional, or maybe they're verbally abusive, or whatever it is, that's working against you. It is not you. It does not define you. And now it's unfair to you because now you have to do the work to undo the neurological like connections somebody else has formed for you. And that's not fair, but it is not who you are. So Self-concept is a really interesting concept. Also, very important to understand, your self-concept is not going to be the same or identical in any way to how anybody else sees you. And nobody in your life, no matter how many people there are, whether there's like tens or hundreds or thousands of people who know you, nobody's perception of you is going to be the same. So your perception of yourself, your self-concept, is going to be different in some way than everybody else's in your life, and everybody's in your life is going to see you differently, whether it's slightly or dramatically, than each other. So who are you really? Are you who you think you are? Or are you who your mother thinks you are, or your best friend, or your worst enemy? Is there a right answer? Is there a definitive like definition of who you are? And the fact is, maybe there's not. And sometimes our self-concept is sometimes it's dramatically different or dramatically unfair or incorrect compared to some other people's perceptions of us. Because sometimes we perceive things about ourselves that are really positive, and then we're like, no, that's bad. We're bad in this way. And it's not true, because we're our own worst critics, which kind of contradicts what we're going to get to at the end of this lecture. We are our own worst critics, but we also give ourselves more benefit than we give other people. It doesn't make sense, but yet it does, because they're both true. So self-concept is really interesting. I just want to make clear that it is not a set definitive thing. It's flexible and it's subjective. One video that's really good to look at about this is a video from Charisma on Command. It's called I can't remember what it's called, because the actual picture on the thumbnail it has a different name. But if you just look up Charisma on Command, Theon Greyjoy, it will come up, and it's how identity shapes something. I can't remember exactly, but if you look that up, it will come up. You don't have to have watched Game of Thrones or know who Theon Greyjoy is to understand it. They're just using him as an example, and it's a really informative and beneficial video to watch. Social comparison theory is huge in how we develop and how our self-concept continues to develop and how our self-esteem develops from that as well. Because we are constantly, whether it's conscious or unconscious, we are constantly comparing ourselves to other people, and not necessarily in a way where it's like, oh, I need to be more like them, or I'm jealous, or I'm envious, or I feel like I'm better than them. It's not necessarily in that way. I mean, that is included, but it's in a way where we subconsciously gauge who we are based on other people's reactions to us and how other people behave. It's like this kind of way that we've evolved throughout history. Humans have evolved throughout history to kind of form our self-concept as we just automatically, without even thinking about it, look at other people and think, okay, this is how they're acting, I should act the same. Or they're acting like this, and I'm a little different in this way. I'm abnormal, or I'm different, and it's not necessarily a conscious thing all the time, or even most of the time. But social comparison theory is how we compare ourselves to others to get a better idea of who we are. Again, this is subjective, and our brains want to treat it like it is an objective thing. It's not. Be who you are. All right, moving on. Again, with self-concept being subjective, obsolete info is one thing that can affect this. Past failures and successes, or past experiences. People who have gone through some kind of abuse, whether it be some kind of like sexual abuse, or maybe some kind of emotional abuse from a parent, or even from a stranger. Like, it doesn't matter. Sometimes it depends on the person, but sometimes they allow that. That's an unfair word to use, but sometimes it affects how they see themselves, their past experiences. Maybe if somebody has been sexually assaulted, they might blame themselves. Um, so, but sometimes it's in a positive way too, but it might affect us in a negative way. Past successes, people who have had a lot of success, they might attribute that to who they are. And this can be really dangerous, because they attribute it to their self-worth. And sometimes those successes are materialistic, and I really want to get into my thesis. I'm like, that is actually the failed hero's journey. But really, your past successes can give you a false sense of of worth, where you're maybe losing humility or not being humble, and you're kind of getting full of yourself. Or your past failures, you might be placing too much weight on those. I've had students who had some failures here and there, and one of them put so much stock in it that she ended up needing to drop out of school for a little bit, and we were in contact through that, and then she eventually got back in and she graduated with honors. But it was really it had to do with her past experiences. Her parents were she was a first generation college student. Her parents were abusive. They were drug addicts, very hard drugs. And she was so afraid she was going to end up like them, that any kind of failure that happened with her in school, she was like, that's it, I'm going to be a failure. It was very hard for her to learn how to pick herself back up, where it might be easier for others. So past failures, past successes definitely affect us. Distorted feedback. We all deal with unjust criticism. We live in a world of social media. We are constantly, whether we want to ignore it or not, or even if we consciously know something isn't true, if we're on social media and people continuously insult us or call us stupid, even when we know they're like full of, it affects us. It does affect us, whether we want it to or not. So unjust criticism, and really placing my emphasis on unjust here. Also, overinflated praise. This is a big one too. My grandfather was a brilliant man. Ended up being kind of a mid dad. No, he was worse than that. But the thing is that he really, he met my grandma right after World War II, and he's like, oh, baby, I'm going to take care of you. You'll never have to work. That's not what happened. She worked. She was the sole breadwinner from the late 1940s on. And he was like, I'm brilliant. The things are just going to come to me. And he taught piano. I mean, he was a great pianist, taught piano out of his studio. But he didn't make very much money, and he didn't really care, and he didn't really pay a lot of attention to his kids. But the thing is that his mother told him his whole life, you're a genius. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're less. All the opportunities are going to come to you. And so he kind of built up this sense of entitlement that I'm sure, she did not realize she was creating, but that's what happened. And then perfection, huge thing in our day and age with Instagram and with TikTok and Facebook and whatever else social media things are out there. Snappy chat. I don't even know how to work that thing. I just use the filters and save them, and I have no idea how else to work it. So perfection, we see everybody else's pictures and their filters, and we see their stories and what they're doing, and we're like, we have to be like that. We have this the FOMO, fear of missing out. When I was growing up, it was supermodels on the cover of every magazine, and everybody thought they had to be super thin, and it was unfair. And now it's influencers, or even our friends. When my ex-boyfriend and I broke up after 2 years, and he was incredibly toxic and psychologically abusive, so much so that I have not dated in the 5 years since. People kept telling me, but your pictures on Instagram, you guys look so happy. And I was like, well, I wasn't taking pictures or videos of us fighting, or him interrogating me, or waking me up in the middle of the night, asking weird questions, or him drinking too much and getting abusive. I wasn't recording that stuff. So we have to remember that as well, because that does affect our self-concept. I'm sure people were looking at my posts thinking that their relationship and they weren't enough for their relationship because they were comparing it subconsciously to mine, which was not indicative of reality. That's not what was happening in my life. And so perfection is a bad thing, but it affects us all. Social expectations as well. We want to fit into this norm, and we want to like kind of, sometimes we want to downplay our strengths. And I love this part in Barbie. I'm not saying go and boast and brag and all this stuff, but I love this part in Barbie. If you've seen Barbie at the very beginning and they're in the dance party and it's like, oh, Barbie, you look so beautiful. And Barbie says, I know, I feel so beautiful. And she's like, I feel beautiful too. Oh, you know, there's a lot of Barbies. I feel beautiful too. And like, yeah, you're beautiful. And from watching interviews about that film, what they were trying to get across is like, stop trying to downplay stuff. You know, like somebody calls you beautiful, be like, no, I'm not. Embrace it. Like that, you don't have to be full of yourself to do that. But social expectations affect us in so many different ways. And again, I'm not going to go over this again because I just went over this, but a healthy self-concept is flexible and but it also resists change. These two things, you know, clash. So again, I want to remind you, go watch that Charisma on Command video about Theon Greyjoy, because it gives you so many great insights into our self-concept. So, all right, we're at 20 minutes now. What's next? Oh, we already went over that. Self-presentation is how we present ourselves strategically. Face work. We are constantly changing how we present ourselves, and how we do this is really kind of gauging who we're around, how we should act, and it doesn't mean that we're two-faced or anything, but we do have different faces. We have different identities around different people, even within our friends. Like, I'm really fun with some friends, like only fun, and other friends, like, it's like, you know, a bit of a mix, and then some friends, it's like we only have serious conversations. So when we all get together, it's weird. Just kidding. But we're different people with everyone. Impression management is really how we put our face on. Like, how do we behave in accordance with how we want to be seen? Because we are always thinking about that, whether we realize it or not. And we do have a public and private self. We have, I mean, and this says that like there's two. We have several different identities. All right. And then self-monitoring, which we went over in the first chapter, which is how we monitor how we should behave. And some people are really good at this, and some people are really bad at this. Like, they might walk into a funeral going, what's up, guys? Let's take shots. And you're like, your self-monitoring sucks. Everybody's depressed here. Read the room, right? But like, self-monitoring is really gauging the situation, the mood, everything about it, and then letting that inform how you are going to present yourself. All right, and I'm going to stop right there before we get into self-fulfilling prophecies, and then we're going to pick it up with a fourth video. This is getting long, I'm sorry, but usually I take at least 2 or 3 classes to go over this, so, and each of those are like an hour and 15 minutes, so this is actually short, and, you know, when you look at the bigger picture. All right.